Okay, so the next question says, a decrease in aggregate supply can result in which of the following? A recession. B, cost push inflation. C, demand pull inflation. Or D, unemployment. So let's take a look at our aggregate demand, aggregate supply curve graph. Very similar to a regular supply and demand curve graph. We have short run aggregate supply, and we have aggregate demand, and we're saying a decrease in aggregate supply. So that's going to be a leftward shift. Get this, whoops. Short run aggregate supply. We say this is 1, this is 2. And so this is what we're talking about here. And so one big thing that's happened is going to be this change in price. P1, P2, so prices have gone up, aka inflation. And next we have a reduction in output as well. And so let's take a look at the answer choices to see which of these best describes this change in the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. So A says a recession, and so we are not exactly sure if that's the case, right? We don't know where the short run equilibrium is relative to the long run aggregate supply. It could be the case that long run aggregate supply is to the left of the equilibrium, even to the left of a new equilibrium. In that case, it's not necessary that we would experience a recession, because the short run GDP output could still be greater than the long run aggregate supply. So that's not necessarily going to be the case here. B says cost push inflation, and so this is when inflation occurs due to a leftward shift in the aggregate supply curve as a result of increasing input costs for suppliers. And so that seems to be a really good description of what's happening here. And the last step of that is because of a shift, we see higher prices. And that seems to be a really good explanation for overall what's going on here. We had a leftward shift in the aggregate supply, and that's going to increase the overall price in the economy, leading to inflation. And so cost push inflation seems to be an apt description for our situation. But we can take a look at the other answer choices just to be sure. C says demand pull inflation. And so this one refers to when inflation is going to occur, prices are going to go up because aggregate demand is going to increase. Therefore, aggregate demand shifts to the right, and we would see an increase in inflation. However, in our current circumstance, we're only talking about shifting the aggregate supply, not shifting the aggregate demand at all. And so demand pull inflation does not seem to be a really good description of our situation. Finally, D says unemployment. And again, we might say that unemployment and recession go hand in hand. And because we don't know where long-run aggregate supply is, we simply do not know enough to see whether or not this decrease in aggregate supply is going to have an increasing effect on unemployment. So it looks like B is going to be our best answer here. A decrease in aggregate supply can result in cost push inflation. And the previous tutor also says cost push inflation, reduction in the supply of goods and services shall bid up prices of these goods and services. It shall affect unemployment indirectly, hence the correct option is B. So yes, this is going to be our correct answer here. Let's take a look at the next question. Number 2, in the short run or intermediate range of the aggregate supply curve, higher aggregate demand will increase A, the price level but reduce real GDP, B, real GDP without raising the price level, C, the price level without affecting real GDP, or D, both the price level and real GDP. And so again, the intermediate range of the aggregate supply curve is going to be the sloped range. And so let's redraw our aggregate demand, aggregate supply. We have price and we have quantity. We have demand, aggregate demand, and we have short run aggregate supply. And we're saying higher aggregate demand. So we're saying an increase in aggregate demand. What's going to occur? And so we see two things happening. One, our old price was at P1, and our new price is at P2. So price has gone up, so we know there's going to be inflation. And second, our old quantity was Q1, and our new output is Q2. So we know that GDP is going to increase. And so that's going to be the two effects we're looking to see in our answer choices. And so rereading the answer choices, one says higher aggregate demand will increase the price level but reduce real GDP. And so yes, they were correct about the price level, but GDP did not go down. GDP also went up, so it's not going to be A. B says increase real GDP without raising the price level, and we see that they both increased, so it's not going to be B. C says will increase the price level without affecting real GDP, and again, real GDP is affected and it goes up, so it's not going to be C. And D says will increase both the price level and real GDP, and so that's going to be the best answer here to cover both of the things that happen with this increase in aggregate demand. So D is going to be our best answer here. So let's take a look at the previous tutor. The previous tutor says in intermediate range, there's the increase in real GDP and price level, both increase, hence D is correct. So that's great, we're in agreement. And finally C, not C, number 3. Question 3 says, which of the following helps explain why real GDP is inversely related to price levels within the framework of the Ades model? So this is the Ades model. Why is aggregate demand decreasing? Downward sloping. And so let's take a look at some of the answers. Answer source A says as prices fall, domestic consumers have an incentive to buy more of cheaper goods and services. And so that's going to be a really good answer choice here because that's a almost direct explanation for why lower prices result in higher output. And so, or not higher output, higher spending, right? If prices go down, people buy more. And so this is something that's going to be really hard to beat in terms of the other answer choices, but we can take a look. The second question says, as prices fall, the wealth of money holding the fixed quantity of money increases, causing them to expand their purchases of goods and services. So this talks about an increase in purchasing power parity, and actually I'm inclined to overrule my previous statement that A was the best answer, saying that because purchasing power is increasing when prices fall, then that's a reason why people expand purchases. I think it's even better of an answer than answer choice A, because answer choice A simply says you have a greater incentive, whereas B actually tells the mechanism by which people do have that incentive, which is an increase in wealth or purchasing power. And so that's going to be a better answer. So C says as prices fall, the government will have to reduce taxes, which will lead to an increase in the quantity of goods and services purchased. And so it's not necessarily the case that if prices fall that the government has to reduce taxes. And so that answer is going to fall short. And D says as prices fall, the monetary authority will have to increase the money supply, which will lead to an increase in the quantity of goods and services purchased. And so again, if prices fall, the Federal Reserve is not required to increase the money supply. So again, that answer choice is going to fall short. So we're left with B as what I think would be the best answer here. So let's take a look at the other answer choice given, other answer picked by the previous tutor. And the previous tutor says here A is correct because purchasing power of people increase in the demand more, and that leads to an increase in the production of goods and services. And so again, I think B would be better for question 3. And you know, the previous tutor similarly identifies an increase in purchasing power as the reason for an increase in purchasing. And that is just better suited towards answer choice B. B is a better answer because it more directly includes the idea that purchasing power increases when price goes down. As a result, overall consumption spending increases. And so that's going to be the best answer there. We're going to have to mark the solution as incorrect just because that last answer we disagree with. And so we can move on to the next question though.